Hello and welcome to The Exchange. These days we live in an instant world and the demand for instant results is greater than ever. Technology has given us access to more services, products and experiences than any other time in human history.
That's right. A lot of our daily needs and wants can be delivered almost immediately. But what happens when we need to wait? What are the consequences of not knowing how to wait? Do all good things still come to those who wait?
Welcome to the world of instant, where we can have what we want when we want it. But what happens when we're forced to wait? How do we react when things are out of our control? What happens to an instant culture who no longer knows how to wait?
Joining us we have Dr Stephen Glackin, who is a research fellow from Swinburne Institute. Stephen's fields of expertise range from sociology to computer science, and his PhD looked at instant gratification on the individual and community.
Dr. Simon Kinsella is a clinical psychologist and director of corporate and personal consulting. He provides coaching, consulting and psychological services to businesses, individuals and families. Lovely to have you guys.
Thank you.
Tell us, what is instant gratification, Simon?
It's really the inability to wait to have your needs met, and that could be physical needs or it could be needs for services or products.
And would you say it's a recent phenomenon?
Oh, not at all. There's been research going on in this field for decades.
Stephen, is it instant gratification, has it become more of a thing these days compared with like 50 years ago? Do we want more instantly now than, say, our previous generations?
That depends on the context. If you're looking at internet and delivery, media delivery, sure, but if you're looking at wants and needs, I don't think there's been that much of a change, to be honest.
Okay, so people of all generations have wanted it and wanted it now.
Well, there's an issue, there's a thing called individualisation, and that's growing in society, and people want to be more individualised. They want to make their own identities. That's growing. And people, as a result of that, instant gratification is sort of growing, but it's not necessarily instant gratification per se. It's wanting their own thing when they want it. But people are still willing to wait.
Right, okay.
And are they willing to wait for something that is individualised for them? Is that the issue here?
That's probably a little bit too complex. If you take it back to a human element for a moment, I have a son, he works hard at school, he knows he has to work hard. Most people in the communities that I looked at were very bohemian, and they were very wishy-washy. They want everything now. They wanted to be artists, they wanted to be celebrated, they wanted all the good things in life, because that's what the media is telling them they should achieve. But when they enter mainstream life and they have to get a job, then they learn that they have to work. So instant gratification seems to be in particular community groups that don't associate directly with mainstream groups.
Very interesting. And
Yeah.
how would you identify some of those groups?
Well, you see it a lot in the so-called hipster groups around. Like if you go to areas like Brunswick or where I did my PhD in Fremantle, Western Australia, there's an awful lot of artist communities that don't necessarily engage with people outside of that. Some of them do, but a lot of them don't. So you end up with a lot of people that might think they're more important than they are. And if they entered into mainstream society, maybe they'd find out that they had to work a little bit more. So it's an instant gratification. It's almost like a magical solution to the contemporary media, where society's telling you that you can, through a movie, you can be a hero straight away. Like, there's no movie that openly celebrates being mundane.
That's a very good point.
So if you think about that as the thing that's training you, you're going to want to achieve that. And if you don't enter into a job, you're allowed not to achieve that by making some magical solution to it.
Yeah, I think we talked about the disappointed generation at one point, Simon, and is that similar to what we're talking about here, that if things don't happen quickly?
Well, I think one of the issues is that we have children who are being brought up in a manner that fosters instant gratification, and that's fortunately a fairly small proportion of the population. On the other hand, there are larger numbers of people who are receiving good parenting who are learning from a young age that they need to wait for certain things. So we do, I think, have a mainstream of young people and adults that are learning that there are things that they need to wait for that the things that are worth having are worth working for. But then there's a smaller group of people who want the instant high, or they want the instant reward. They want the instant satisfaction of being able to get onto the internet and buy something now, rather than having to wait and work for something.
What do you think encourages that motivation? Why do we want stuff? Why do people want instant gratification?
It depends on what topic you're looking at. But if you're looking at internet stuff, it strives for efficiency. It's an ever-reducing spiral of faster and faster times. I was reading something the other day where if you wait, I think it's 30 seconds for something to load, you walk away from it. That's it. That's like 80% of the population will walk away from it after 30 seconds. That's the sort of environment that we're living in terms of technology. But in terms of buying a house and whatnot, people still have to save. So it depends which lens you're looking at, or what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to...
So is it a psychological construct that we're looking at here? Is it people that are predisposed to urgency?
Well, we do know that there are some environmental factors that affect the way a young person's brain works. There could be exposure to drugs in utero. There's also parenting factors. So parents who don't delay gratification in infants encourage that need for immediate gratification later through life. So there's a combination. And then as young people get older, unless the expectations are set that they have to delay gratification, they have to work towards things, then those sort of early factors are further compounded.
Are there any benefits to instant gratification?
Oh, it depends how capitalistic you want to think about it. I mean, I can't really answer that question. I can think of the disbenefits and the frustrations that can go with it, particularly, as Simon was saying, if you come from an environment where you haven't been trained to deal with that, that could be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. So there'd be more consequences that would be negative, you would say?
Yeah, will you take, I mean, when we travel to Africa, for example, and we have a saying, TIA, this is Africa, because often what we plan to do, and when we plan to do it, becomes irrelevant.
Like the computer on the clip we saw before.
Yeah.
And you just have to deal with that. Because people are more important than the production.
There's also a sort of a macro theme, if you like. There was a book and a movie called Fight Club, and quite a lot of that was celebrating the fact that the individual wasn't being celebrated. They were told they were going to be heroes and told they were going to be rock stars. Hasn't been achieved. So there's almost a generational frustration, Generation X particularly. But that's quite a romantic thing as well. I mean, Generation X is like being angry. And, well, not angry, but we like having that edginess. Generation Y might be similar. But in terms of reality and not make-believe,
do you think, we mentioned before about technology, things like that, internet, etc. Have modern technologies intensified our needs and expectations?
Well, I think certainly when it comes to information, our expectations are very high these days, particularly in this kind of Western culture where we have good access to internet a lot of the time. It's very easy if you've got a question about something to get online and get instant gratification. You can find the answer straight away, and you can usually find a good answer. When it comes to other issues like perhaps purchasing products or meeting a longer term goal, I don't think the internet has a great place in that, because the internet can't make you save money for a house any faster. The internet can't get you a job any faster. It can give you access to avenues to get those things, but it won't make it happen that much faster.
Sure. I mean, I certainly see that in my own life if the Wi-Fi is a bit slow, especially when, as Christie said, we travel somewhere else, and you actually, well, I find quite a level of frustration rising up on the inside of me. But the things that you're talking about here, really the big ticket items in life, we still have to wait for. They don't happen overnight, so we don't have such an expectation of those being instantly gratified.
No, that's right. And I also think there are people out there who are debunking some of the romanticised ideas like getting rich quick. There are experts out there who continually make the point that getting rich quick doesn't generally happen for most people, that if you want to be affluent, you have to work at it. If you want to be qualified, you have to work at it. If you want anything of substance in life, you really have to work at it.
Very true.
And I'd agree with that as well. Most of the people that I'd met through my PhD, they're exactly like that.
Do you think that this pace that is being set by technology is necessary to actually keep up to speed with today's demands? Like, I mean, what if you want to just opt out? Is it possible, or will you just cease to exist?
Of course, no, there are people who do opt out, and we do know, for instance, there are people who live on the dole, for instance, who are quite happy surfing every day and not having any interaction with devices. I think probably it's harder if you want to stay engaged, but also then need to protect some personal time, because mobile phones are tracking devices these days. You can contact most people 24 hours a day, and we have to learn about setting boundaries around our own limits and also setting the expectations to the wider world, so that people that we interact with, like work colleagues for instance, know that they can't contact us at 2 in the morning or 6 in the morning and expect a reply.
But is it possible even to get a job these days if you don't have computer expertise? Like,
I doubt it. Well, it depends on the area, wouldn't it?
yeah, but it would be difficult.
Generally, impossible.
So you have to kind of keep up with it to some degree.
You're not really going to get admin jobs or professional jobs without some level of computer expertise, because apart from anything else, the portals to getting those jobs are often IT based.
This isn't necessarily just a computer issue. This is largely a media-driven issue as well. As I said at the beginning, the media never celebrates mundanity.
No, a normality, yeah.
Yeah. So if that's all you're getting, if that's all you're getting, that's what you're going to respond to. But then there's another issue, which is the death of big social narratives. Years ago, a working class person would know what a working class person was. There was one newspaper, they would read that newspaper written by that organisation, and then they would go and do that thing. That's a very simplistic view. But now with the plurality of images you can get and the different stories you can get, that grand narrative is largely broken down. So there's nothing really guiding people apart from mainstream media anymore.
Yeah, very good point.
Very good point.
We'll come back in just a moment. Don't forget, if you'd like to know more, you can head over to our website. We'll be back with Street Talk and more right after this.
We live in an instant society. How good are you at waiting?
I'm a very impatient person, so no, I'm not very good at waiting. I'm good, I've got patience. Oh, not very good at all.
I've got a lot of patience, so I find that I'm able to wait quite a lot.
Terrible at waiting.
Really?
No patience whatsoever.
Not too good, I'm quite impatient. But if it's a big ticket item, I'll normally wait and save the cash for it. If that makes sense? Yeah. Probably not very good. No.
Your wife agrees?
He's awful. Depends what I'm waiting for. If I'm sitting in traffic, I'm not real happy. I'm waiting for my schnitzel roll down the corner there that I just had. That was pretty quick, so it was good.
What have you been made to wait for?
A lot of the time it's coffee. Yeah, every time I'm in a cafe. I actually work in a cafe as well, but it takes a very long time, like 20 minutes or so a lot of the time, and I can't stand it.
Particularly shopping, annoying people, walking beside them just in everyday life. Yeah. I'm just very impatient.
I think life experience and things like that. I think I spent quite a long time as a child in hospital, and that made me have patience pretty quick.
One that immediately comes to mind is waiting at the airport. The only downside of that is being a cigarette smoker. It gets a little bit angsty after about a couple of hours, but I seem to manage right through it.
Are you waiting for a coffee, waiting in traffic, waiting to board a plane, waiting for the really slow people to board their plane? That takes forever.
Probably lack of cash. I'm trying to think what else.
I will just about cut off my nose to spite my face if I have to wait for something.
What situations force me to have to wait? Just a queue. What else am I waiting unless there's a queue? I ain't waiting.
And how do you approach it?
I sit there angrily and wait for them to come and say and apologise.
How do you cope when you're faced with that?
Not well. I am a polite person, so I don't confront people or complain, but inside I'm very just annoyed.
And what do you do when you can't cope?
Go for a walk.
You just got to breathe. It's the only way you deal with it, because if you do anything, it just makes it take longer.
I'm usually not in very good humour. And my wife would prefer to be not around me.
I'm pretty calm. I'm not too fussed by waiting. It's, you know, time.
Take it in your stride.
Yeah, I think time comes to all who wait. I think that's the quiz, or that's the quote. Yeah. So yeah.
Welcome back. We're having a great chat about waiting in this world of instant gratification. Sandra now joins us. Tell us some of the things that highlighted to you on the streets.
Oh, look, I'd say that I'm surrounded by people who don't like waiting. Like almost, apart from maybe one person, the majority of the people that I spoke to either are angry, impatient. So I'm thinking when we're going down the street, we're surrounded by ticking time bombs in one way.
First world problems though, waiting for coffee?
Yeah, 20 minutes for coffee is a long time.
Maybe travel to a third world country. Is there less expectation, do you think, in other countries maybe versus a Western nation like Australia?
Oh, certainly. If you go to places like Cambodia, which is very poor, you get people's expectations are completely different. The whole pace of life is completely different as well. And so there's a lot more tolerance for things just not going to plan, because they usually don't.
But what is that doing, like here in Australia, what is that doing to us psychologically if we're always like angry and frustrated and impatient?
But what was being portrayed on the movie was, that was efficiency, that wasn't gratification. So this is the technological issue once again. We're used to some things being fast and efficient, whereas gratification is actually getting something positive back from it. So they're two completely different issues. One is buying into technology and fast coffee and fast cars and no queues and fast selling and buying, but the other is actually feeling good from something happening quickly. So they're two very different issues. And what I saw on the TV was complaining about efficiency, not gratification.
Do you think that when they say, I agree with that, I could see the difference there, and I get disappointed with the lack of efficiency, but because we're not going to die if we don't get a coffee. It's not the gratification. Not sure. But so how do you see, what areas would you say are legitimate areas for gratification?
Well, I think if you're, and this is probably getting a bit too psychological for me, if you're getting some sort of issue where the anxiety or the frustration of not being able to achieve specific things is having some sort of negative response, or as a society you're starting to see elevated levels of anxiety because no one can afford to buy a house, let's say. I mean, that might be just economic, but if you're looking at anything any mass social issue that's got something to do with psychology, well, then I think that's where you should be looking at. But that's outside my field.
So that's what you were saying. I mean, the issues there was elevated anger over simple issues like coffee and queues.
Yes, and there's a wonderful piece of research that was started in the 70s by Walter Mischel, where it's now referred to as the Stanford Marshmallow Study, where what they did was get a classroom of primary school children and put 2 marshmallows on a plate in front of them. And they said to the children, the experimenter said, I'm going to walk out of the room and I'm going to be gone for a few minutes, but when I come back, those of you who still have marshmallows will get 2 more. Those of you who don't won't get any more. And they followed those children up over a number of years, and what they found was that in adulthood, the children who were able to delay gratification and wait for the extra reward were the ones who were more successful in a range of aspects of life. They tended to get better paid, they had better jobs, they were less likely to have come into contact with the law. So there's all sorts of positive consequences for being able to delay gratification. And certainly what I know from a clinical point of view, clients that I see who struggle with this are much more angry. They do feel like they're about to blow up at people when somebody cuts in front of them, or if they're delayed unnecessarily. There's very high levels of tension.
So there are real benefits then to waiting. And I hear what you were saying about efficiency, but doesn't one feed into another? Because our society is so geared at being efficient. You know, you pull up at a fast food place and you order. And I even found it myself when a couple of my kids were with me and they wanted fast food recently, and we had to wait 5 minutes. They weren't ready. And efficiency then leads into this whole instant gratification thing. I wonder if they're 2 different things or really one feeding into another.
Well, I don't think it's been theorised that much, and if it has, apologies to the theorists. But I keep going back to gratification being something that makes you feel really good, while getting a meal on time makes you feel good, and waiting 20 minutes for a coffee might annoy the hell out of you. gratification to me is something a lot grander, something that really feeds your ego and makes you feel good about yourself.
Right.
Like as I was saying earlier, being a movie star or a rock star, or being the boss at work, something that really gives you a sense of really positive feelings about yourself. And not being able to achieve those might make you frustrated for no reason, just because you don't have a realistic understanding of life in general.
So possibly purchasing of brand clothes as opposed to non-brand clothes, because that's what makes you feel good. It's about what makes you feel good.
That's the sort of instant gratification I'm talking about, and wanting the perfect house and just wanting those things that make you feel good. Whereas we are in a fast-paced society. When we pull up to a fast food chain, we do want our food quickly, but that's a product of both the advertising and our expectations.
Yep. Yeah.
And having a sense of being able to be patient, is that important overall for our well-being? I guess that's for you, Simon.
Absolutely. I think what a lot of people struggle to do these days is to put themselves in other people's shoes. So when they see somebody cut them off as they're walking down the street, or if they see a driver who's a bit slow and a bit lost, they're coming from the point of view of thinking that person should be driving directly from A to B. There should be no hesitation. They should be following the speed limit and obeying the rules at all times, with no consideration for the fact that the person might be lost, they might be confused, they might be being distracted by something else. There's a range of other factors that they just fail to consider because they're only thinking about themselves.
Thanks so much, Sandra.
You're welcome. See you next time.
See more of Sandra and Street Talk. You can head over to theexchangetv.com.au. We'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back. We're discussing The Waiting Game with Stephen Glackin and Simon Kinsella.
Assuming that patience is actually a virtue, Simon, what would you say, how do we develop it?
I think people need to slow down and examine their expectations about other people and about the world that we live in. So one of the things that I really encourage people to do is to look at the assumptions that they make about what's driving other people's behaviour or how things should work out.
And so by that you mean being considerate?
Well, being considerate, also taking into account a range of factors that might affect how quickly things happen. If we're in traffic, for instance, we might have expectations that the person in front of us should be paying attention all the time, or if we're walking down the street, we might have expectations that everybody should know exactly where they're going and exactly what they're doing at all times. And obviously that makes no sense at all. It's just not logical. And so we have to step out of ourselves a little bit and put ourselves in the shoes of other people to really slow down and understand that these things happen for all of us.
Sure. I mean, surely patience, by the very nature of it, can only develop in your life by waiting.
Correct. And understanding what's at play when you have to wait.
Yeah, very true. So, I mean, the prayer, God give me patience, give it to me now, is really contradictory, isn't it? I'm really interested in your thoughts, Stephen, on the whole slow movement, the slow food and slow life movement, just kind of deliberately slowing life down.
I think it's fantastic. Personally, I cook everything from first principles. It's nice and relaxing. It's slow in the kitchen. You know what you're doing. It takes longer, usually, because you're doing everything from first principles, but it's just good for the soul. Slow stuff, generally, I'm definitely going to build my own house next time. It's just nice knowing doing everything from first principles. So, personally, I really enjoy it. I think it's just good for the head.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you work at a snail's pace, does it? It just means that you follow the process and kind of deliberately slow down, control your phone, IT, all of that kind of stuff.
Yep, switch off for a bit and get human.
And should we actually even push back against instant?
In some areas. In some areas that are deeply human, And maybe just remember that we're not on a TV screen all the time, not in a movie.
And I think you mentioned before about celebrating normal. Actually celebrating the fact that we do normal things around our home. We don't live on a vacation. We don't, live in a display home or whatever the case may be. What would you say about pushing back against?
Look, it's something that I really encourage people to do, particularly in the workplace, because workplaces can be so intrusive these days with email and phone contact. But even as you're raising children too, to have some balance between school life, extracurricular activities and time just to sit and do nothing. children don't get bored very often these days, and I think the chance to get bored is actually quite valuable.
I'd love to get bored occasionally. It'd be so good. Stephen and Simon, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget, we'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas. What's important to you and what topics do you think we should be covering on The Exchange? Hope you can join us next time.
See you then.